We're waiting for folks to sign in. We can see folks are rolling in for today's webinar. Just a housekeeping note, for those of you who would like to ask questions, please do. We encourage questions. Please note to submit those questions on the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Most of the time, we'll weave them into the discussion. And if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We will follow up with you after the webinar concludes. Also, another note, the presentation will be available after the webinar concludes. You'll get a notification sometime today that will send you a link where you'll be able to download the presentation and be able to have that for future reference. So welcome everybody to our webinar today. I'm Kim Brader and I'm the VP of Marketing with Charter School Capital. With me is Michael Barber, and so I will let Michael introduce himself and then I can tell you a little bit more about myself and Charter School Capital.
Hi, good morning, and thanks Kim. My name is Michael Barber. I run a small digital marketing shop based in Los Angeles called Barber & Hewitt. We specialize in strategy and planning for mid-market organizations, and I've had the pleasure to work with Charter School Capital for the last 6 or 7 years at this point, and also have helped a number of different schools, charter schools in the LA market with some of the strategies and tactics you're going to see today, along with student acquisition and retention, and being a member of 1 or 2 charter boards over the past few years.
Thanks, Michael. And again, I'm Kim Brader. I'm the VP of Marketing for Charter School Capital. I've been with the organization for a little over 5 years. Prior to that, I ran an agency in Portland, Oregon called Ant Hill Marketing. So worked with many clients across many verticals, including education and healthcare. So I brought my expertise to Charter School Capital, and we have been working with charter schools across the country to help them with their financing for working capital and to help support them with facilities needs. And we also have been doing a lot of work with charter schools to help them with student enrollment, among other things. So I think today's webinar will be informative and helpful for most of you charter leaders out there. So today's agenda, we're going to go through several things listed here. Some of these items we're going to run through pretty quickly, but again, the presentation will be available after the webinar. So if you want to refer back to it or have questions, again, you can submit your questions, and also you can contact us. Our contact information will be available at the end of the deck as well.
Great. So we're going to start today with
Go ahead.
We're going to start today with talking about what is digital marketing, just to define and give us a working definition for the next couple of slides. So if we think about where we are in today's landscape from a marketing perspective, we have more and more people that are connected online these days than we ever have done before. And in large part, when they're looking for opportunities, whether it be to buy, their next T-shirt, or whether they're starting to make a decision and understand different options of where they can send their students or their children, that journey largely starts online these days. There's a really interesting stat that often gets noted in a variety of these different presentations that usually 84% of individuals, when they start to make a decision on whether it is buying or researching something in their life, 84% of us typically start that search online and largely within a search engine. So it's imperative for schools these days to have a solid presence online so that people can find them and understand, what point of differentiation are they bringing to their students, and help parents understand exactly how they can go about either applying to be a part of the school or at least providing an understanding of what makes that school that much different. So digital can help us communicate all of those opportunities. It can help us tell our story online. It can help give a sense of what our organization does differently in the marketplace and why we wanted to bring those particular educational opportunities to the marketplace. because it allows us to tell those stories in a variety of different ways. We can tell them through content, through text content, right? Whether those are blog posts or copy on our About Us pages or showing off our student stories. We can tell those through images. Of course, the web is more and more these days a visual medium between things like Pinterest and Facebook. And today, more than ever, stories are being told via video. There's some crazy stat that came out of YouTube about a year ago that says 80% of the content that people are going to consume online and via their phones over the next 2 to 3 years is largely going to be video content. And you're starting to see a lot of great charter programs across the country tap into those trends and tell their stories through video, whether that be on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and tell them in a variety of different ways, whether that's short stories, little 15-second, if you will, glimpses of what life is at that school, or through telling the stories of their students and their teachers through longer, more editorial-based content that you may find on YouTube or some of the other places. So digital provides us a way to communicate not only through all those different mediums, but also communicate with a variety of our target audiences. As charter schools, we have not only audiences that are our students and parents, but we have to be advocates of the charter movement. We also have to be advocates and be able to bring our stories to government officials and cities so that we can advocate on our behalf. And digital allows us to communicate those stories to those different audiences in a really meaningful way that we can do either via text-based or visual content like images or video.
So one other thing I wanted to add to Michael's comment is that, you know, as you're thinking about how to deploy digital marketing for your charter schools, really think about it in terms of what your objectives are overall and what you are planning for marketing. Really, it should be embedded into all the marketing that you're doing, and you may find that something on the digital realm is going to serve you across multiple mediums, not just digital, but it's something to incorporate in your overall thinking, not do separately on its own.
That's a really good point. So along those lines is, what can you do to bring that vision online, whether you're talking to students, parents, being an advocate of the movement, or also being an advocate from a government perspective. What you can bring online is a variety of different things. The question is often where to start. And Kim and I always like to start this conversation with first understanding what your brand is, right? What makes your school unique? What's the essence of who you are, right? What's the purpose that you are bringing to your community? And how do you go about defining that? Once it is defined, it's how do you deliver on those promises, right? All of these things need to be brought to the fold and told either via text or video or image-based content through your website, because you want to be able to tell that story through these digital mediums and bring them to life in different ways. The next thing you're going to want to think about is what you're trying to accomplish, right? What's the goal of having a digital presence or an online presence? Is it to increase enrollment, which most schools are always looking to do those things? Is it to increase retention, right? To make sure that we are returning students to our school on an annual basis? Is it to bring awareness to the community? Maybe the community doesn't know your point of differentiation in the marketplace. You see a variety of charter schools in the movement very much define what type of education difference that they're making in the marketplace, whether that be science and math and STEM sort of programs, or those being arts and the sort of theater-based programs, right? So what's the differentiation in the community? Maybe you're trying to look and generate awareness for new facilities, right? So there's a variety of different things that you can be building a goal around. Then how do you go about communicating that strategically, right? There's a slew of different platforms and social networks online. At last note, there is probably a good 2,500 social media networks out there, right? Of course, the biggies being Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. Increasingly, you're seeing just a plethora of different sort of niche social networks that we will touch on briefly when we get to that section. You've got to be very strategic in which ones you're going to go play in, because nobody, even the best schools, even the largest network schools in the nation, they do not have enough resources, time, and energy to be communicating with audiences in all these different places. So as marketers, we have to go fish where the fish are. And one of the things we would encourage you to do is understand where based on those goals, right? If we're trying to increase enrollment, if we are trying to build community awareness, whatever that goal is, figure out the mediums, and we'll talk about which mediums would be best for some of these goals as we go through. Figure out which particular channels and or mediums that will work well for those goals, because you may be spending too much time in an area that may not be driving some of those goals that you're trying to accomplish. Did you want to add anything to that, Kim?
I think that, just to clarify, brand can mean a lot of things to different people, and the key thing here is really to focus in on what is your school trying to accomplish, and really hone in on a very concise, one-sentence message that helps you communicate what that is, not only because you need to do that to develop your digital plan and what you're going to be doing across the digital mediums, but because you have a community that you need to communicate who you are and what you're doing, and you want it to be consistent. So that's all I would add.
Great. So once you've taken the time to define that brand and bring that essence together, you've figured out what those goals are, and all those different channels that are available to you. What are some of the tactics? What are some of those channels that you can take advantage from a digital perspective? We're going to start with your website or your home base, and we've got a variety of different tactics here that you can see in front of you, from search engine optimization to PPC, or pay-per-click advertising, social media, email marketing, video marketing, and display and retargeting advertising. For some of these, we're only going to touch on them briefly. For others of these, we are not going to talk about them at all, because they're for both schools that are maturing, as well as they require budgets that, even as you get into maturing school, you may not have the ability to do. But we've included tips and tactics that you can utilize for all of these different opportunities within the deck in an appendix that's at the back. So we'd encourage you to take a look at those. But for a lot of these, we are going to touch on them and go through them in depth. So we'll start with your mobile or responsive website. So why is it important for schools to have a mobile or responsive website? Over the last few years, Google, who at the end of the day is your #1 audience online, because you need to be able to satisfy their needs so that you rank for whatever keywords you're targeting, has rolled out a variety of changes over the last, let's say, 3 to 4 years. Those changes have really centered around the end user's experience, the ability to serve your site as fast as possible, the ability to see your site on a variety of different screens, whether that's someone's MacBook Pro or Windows tablet or an iPad or an iPhone or Android phone. So the ability to see all of your website content regardless of screen size. And then also on new and relative content to what you're trying to accomplish. So Google's really looking at those 3 things. Speed, does it look good across platforms? And then do you have fresh or relevant content around what you're trying to target? And those are the really key things that you're going to be looking at in terms of, are we moving our website forward? Or if you're just starting out and you're a year 1 or year 2 school and thinking about maybe doing a redesign, those are the core things you're going to want to think about when it comes to satisfying the needs of Google. Now, those aren't the only things. There's about 500 or so things that Google looks at in terms of their top factors to understand where they're going to rank. But increasingly, those are the 3 things that you're going to want to focus on to ensure that you can rank in a really good way. So where do you start? You're going to want to build your home base. If you're a year 1, year 2 school, or if you're thinking about a redesign, we've got a couple of different recommendations here, and we'll touch on each one of them. There is a plethora of tools out there that can help build your website. The ones that we're suggesting here are used by tons and tons and tons of schools, but that doesn't mean that you're just limited to these. You're going to want to make sure that whichever platform that you choose meets the needs of your organization. Some schools are going to have the budget to utilize outside resources, and you're not going to need to worry about making changes. But most schools need the ability to make on-the-fly changes and want platforms that allow them to do that so that they don't have to be utilizing an external agency or developer or a friend of a friend or someone that's on the board to be making changes to their site. All of the platforms that you see in front of you include those types of functions and functionality so that you can create new templates, you can design a website that matches your brand colors and your brand standards and can bring your brand to life online. and then allow you to make edits such as add new pages, change titles, write blog posts, upload new images or videos as you start to create that content. So a couple of suggestions to look at if you're considering a redesign or just starting out. Those would be Squarespace. If you are an NPR fan, or a podcast fan, you've probably heard them advertising everywhere. Really beautiful templates. They have about 50 at the time of writing or at the time of this webinar that you can choose from. You can customize it to the hilt, everything from fonts to colors to images, and pick a template that really brings your brand to life. There is also a plethora of a developer community around Squarespace, so if you'd like to make significant changes but still be able to use the Squarespace platform, there is a variety of customizations that you can make there. Squarespace runs anywhere from $14 to about $25 per month. You can also get a discount on that on an annual registration, so it's not a heavy lift here, and you're not having to worry about totally designing and working with a designer to bring your brand to life. So the expense here is fairly minimal. The other option is WordPress. WordPress powers somewhere crazy stat neighborhood of like 70% of the sites that we view on a regular basis. There are components of some of the world's most trafficked websites that are built off of WordPress. It's considered an open source platform, meaning that there's a community that supports it. It's entirely free to utilize. All you have to do is build your design around it, or select and purchase a template, and there are literally thousands of templates online that you can customize, again, logo, colors, and bring your brand to life. Wix.com is another platform, again, a place where you can pick a template and make all those changes. And then there are a variety of specialty sort of website content management systems that are out there that are specific for the education market, one of those being Edlio. If you've attended the national conference or many of the state conferences, Edlio is often there. It's a good place if you're at one of those conferences to check out their platform. They have a few different core features that are very different than some of the others that we've suggested here that can help with things like student enrollment tracking and things of that nature. But again, a place where you can do some customization and bring that brand to life. Edlio is more expensive than any of the platforms that we've suggested here. That's largely due to the fact of the additional features that you get with that platform. So some things to consider about, or some questions to ask yourself as you're building a new website. First of which is around design. What does the layout look like? How is color and text used, and how are visuals incorporated? The basic gist here is that you want to be able to bring your brand to life, right? So that when somebody has an experience with you online, it feels like the same experience when they're going into your school. If your brand is hip, funky, and cool, and casual, then it's bringing that brand to life through text, visuals, and colors online. If you're more stodgy and buttoned up and things of that nature, then it's again being able to bring that visual design to life and that brand to life. Innovation. Does the website look like a template, or is it original? And does it convey the uniqueness of the organization? So, as I mentioned, any of those platforms that we suggested, they all have hundreds, if not thousands, maybe WordPress has millions at this point, templates that are available to them. One thing you're going to want to note is, yes, take advantage of those templates because they can help you bring your website to market faster. But taking the time to customize them to your brand so it looks like you've made an effort, I think is really important. And then does it convey, again, the uniqueness of that organization? Maybe you are more of an arts organization, right? Are you bringing to the fold things that help bring that brand to life? Content is the next area you're going to want to consider. And particularly, is it fresh and relevant and interesting, and does it get updated frequently? So Google, more than ever, and pretty much every search engine, when I say Google, I'm encompassing all the major search engines, Yahoo, Bing, and the variety of different ones that are out there. They're looking for fresh and relevant content. Gone are the days when you could just put up a website and let it sit there for years. The more that you do that, the more Google and the rest of the search engines, deem your website as less relevant than those that are updating their content. So what does this mean for schools? You can be telling your stories through blog posts on a regular basis. You should be making sure that either on a quarterly, biannual, or annual basis, as school is ramping up, that you're adjusting content. Maybe there's some unique program or new story about a teacher. So making sure to update that content on a regular basis will be vitally important to ensuring that you get the appropriate rankings that you're looking for. Technology. Do pages load promptly, and do all the links inside and all the pictures inside work correctly? I would harp on the first part of this question, which is how fast or do your pages load promptly? Google and the search engines more than ever, because people are on their cell phones and they're in a variety of mobile places. They're looking for speed, and we're going to give you a way to test your website speed in just a second. But you're going to want to make sure that those pages load promptly. Is it interactive, right? Do you have text, photos, videos, hyperlinks, right? Has it got different types of content to help the user understand what your organization does? And is it easy to use? Google spiders are smart enough, and when I say spiders, these are like little bots that go out and consume your site almost every day to tell Google what's on your site and how easy it is to use. Is it easy to navigate? Is it easy to perform a search function? Is your website structured appropriately? When I say structured, I mean things like folders. If you're familiar with Windows, right, we often categorize things. Google's looking for categorization. So at the top of your navigation, you may have home, about us, contact us, and are the pages underneath those particular top navigation items, are they relative to the item that's above them, right? So making sure that you've structured the content in a way that's easy to understand. Anything to add there, Kim?
No, I think the one thing I wanted to stress was in terms of getting set up to develop your site, and even if you already have a current site, to really make sure that the school owns the name, you own your own name, right? So making sure that if you're a startup or in startup mode, that's one of the first things you should do is make sure that you own your school's name. If it's already being used, come up with something that's very similar. And don't just stop at a .org or a .edu. Try to have across the URLs, because you don't want to compete with someone who's trying to find you, other organizations taking your name.
Yeah, increasingly you're starting to see a lot of different domain extensions. Over the past 2 years, the organization that approves domain names has been rapidly approving, and when I say extension, I mean what comes after the dot. So you've got things like .school or .city names. You've got like .San Diego or .Minneapolis or .New York. So a lot of those extensions are coming in the marketplace that you're going to want to make sure that you grab your domain name for those things so that somebody else doesn't have them. Okay, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest things that Google's looking at these days is page speed. And why are they doing that? Because they want to make sure that people have a really great experience online. There's a really awesome tool that they've brought to the marketplace that allows you to test your website. It is right in front of you. If you're looking to find this particular page, it is linked on this when you receive the PowerPoint later today. You can actually click on the screen, or if you just go to Google and Google PageSpeed, you will find this website. You put in your URL, and it will analyze your website and tell you what is great about it, what is not so great, and what is very bad about it, in very much like a traffic light perspective. Green being good, amber being not so good, and red being really bad. You should fix that, or we are potentially not going to serve your website for different searches. And why do they do this is because they want to make sure that people are having a really fast experience on the web. So you can use Google PageSpeed Insights to really test and understand what is working and what isn't on your website. Okay, once you've got that home base set up, then one of the things you're going to want to consider, one of the tactics, digital tactics that's going to be really important to driving traffic around your site is search engine optimization. So when we say search engine optimization, we're talking specifically about the organic searches. These are the free searches that happen on Google or the likes, right? So these aren't the ones that are ads or have the little ad icon next to them. Those are the ones that Google deems the most relevant to the search context, the search term that someone is searching. The goal for Google is always to give people the best experience after the click. So the way that they are ranking you is your website relevant for the search term? And then is it the best experience, or is it considered the most popular experience around that keyword? Some things to think about that we've already mentioned: ease of navigation. Does it load fast? Is it relative content to the keyword? And is it a mobile or mobile-friendly or responsive website so that regardless of platform, people can can see the content on the website? Here's just a quick SEO example for you to take a look at so you understand the flow. Just for the sake of this conversation, if someone goes on to Google and searches Inspire Charter Schools, They're able to click on those links that are related to Inspire. They're taken to that website, and then they can obviously take an action on that website, right? Whether that's completing an enrollment form or getting to know the school, maybe watching a video on the school or something along those lines. Just a really quick SEO example to take a look at. Why is SEO vitally important for you? It's largely because people searches start online, and they largely start from a search engine perspective. That is why it's important. Almost 80% of people's journeys start with a search engine. So if you're not there, this is an area where you could be losing some traction, losing some audience for the types of keywords that they may be looking at. Some other things to think about, because schools are so locally based, right, and you typically are bringing students come to your school within a certain geographic radius, there is a variety of different tools out there that can help your school rank well beyond just the normal listings or your website listings. And these are what are called local search results. So one of the things you want to do is well beyond just your website, but ensure that your listing, your actual physical location of school or schools is listed within Google My Business or Google Places. This allows your search, if someone's searching for your name, they can provide increasingly more relevant results for your school, and you can provide different things like images and photos and hours in operation and videos all around these search results. You'll note that these are the types of search results that show up in sort of a Google map and or very much when you're searching on sort of local terms. These are the search results that come with the address or something along those lines down usually the right-hand rail or the right side of the screen on desktop and at the top of the screen on mobile. And this allows people to find out a variety of different things regardless of where they are. Some tips to consider when you're thinking about doing search engine optimization for your school site. You're going to want to pick 10 to 15 relevant keywords that have a pretty decent search volume. So how do you go about figuring out the search volume? If you just look up Google Keyword Tool, you can plug in search terms that may be relevant to your school, like Phoenix Charter Program, or Phoenix Arts and Craft, Phoenix Arts Education, or Phoenix STEM type of programs, all of those terms. Google will provide you with what their volume is. Why pick 300 to 3,000? Because you're going to want to make sure that any keywords that you're optimizing for at least have some search volume, because if you're optimizing for a keyword that doesn't have any, then you're optimizing for not. So pick 10 to 15 keywords. One thing to note is to think about how people search these days. So 5 or 10, well, let's go pre-iPhone. So 7 to 8 years ago, a lot of the search terms were very specific, like Phoenix Charter School. But what you're increasingly seeing people ask are things like questions or using their voice to ask those sorts of searches. So think about the ways that somebody may be looking for your program, such as what is the best charter program in Indianapolis or Minneapolis or whatever that may be. So those could be different keyword strings that you can think about utilizing, and Google can help you make those decisions for what keywords work. Incorporate those keywords into your content naturally, like you would a conversation. Back in the old days of SEO, so 10 or so years ago, it used to be that you could just stuff copy with those keywords and rank fairly well. Now Google's looking for a natural conversation. So however you would speak about your schools and incorporating those words in there, you're going to want to write as if you're having a conversation. Write original, quality, and educational content for your site. So ensuring that you've got fresh, relevant content that's applicable to your school, and really avoid, and in fact, completely avoid doing duplicate content, because Google will actually look at duplicate content in a negative way. Then submit your website to what's called Google's Webmaster Tools. We've included a link here for you. You're able to submit what's called your sitemap, which any of the platforms that we've suggested give you really easy ways to provide that sitemap. And this will allow Google to have almost like a little direct connection to your site so that it can index it on a regular basis. And then if you've got the ability to reach out to different reputational directories that are out there, there's a ton of them, to link back to your site, that can also help increase your SEO rankings. So that's SEO. PPC, of course, is the paid advertising that are sitting at the top of your pages these days, or noted as a little ad. You will note that it used to be that these were surrounded by blue boxes or yellow boxes. Google and the search engines want to make money these days as much as possible, because these are the paid listings. And so they are increasingly making the fact that they are ads less noticeable. As you'll note on this screen, we've actually highlighted the ad section that's above it and sort of zoomed in to show you what this looks like on mobile. But increasingly, they're making it much harder for someone to understand if it's a free or paid listing. So what's the key difference between these two? Of course, for one, your organically listing is for free. Your paid listing, you're paying to rank for those particular keywords. In other words, you can utilize a variety of different platforms. If it's Google, it's the AdWords platform. And then there's also the Bing platform. There's a variety of different platforms where you can pay to rank for specific key terms. To give you an idea of how these work, essentially what it is, it gives maximum visibility to your school because these are usually the ads that come at the top of the fold or above the fold, if you will. You can rank if you want to, so you can pay for any keyword that you would like to these days. This works really well because organic is a long-term strategy. So search engine optimization, it isn't something that happens usually 99.9% of the time overnight. It builds up over time. But for schools that maybe have an enrollment issue that they're trying to drive enrollment for the school year, or for schools that are net new that may not be very well known, this can be a really good opportunity to get ranked for terms that you may not get ranked for organically for a number of weeks and or months. So it allows you to get those rankings and sitting at the top. Just keep in mind that you're paying for usually 99% of the time, unless you change your bidding structure, you're paying by the click. So showing up with the ad, or what Google calls an impression, or any of the networks call an impression, you don't pay for the actual impression for the view. You're usually only paying for the click. And you get to bid on what you want to pay for that particular click, anywhere from a few cents all the way through for some of the longer and more popular keywords. Google can be making upwards of a couple $100 per click. You can utilize any single one of these platforms that you see on the right-hand side here to determine what the cost of that click is going to be, how much you want to bid, and how much you want to spend on a daily basis. So it's really flexible in the sense of being able to work with a small, medium, or large budget. So that's paid search and organic search. Kim, did you have anything to add there?
No, you mentioned in the SEO section about content and original content, and we could spend the rest of the time just talking about content. But I wanted to point out that you shouldn't be afraid from those words. You need original content, or actually just writing content. Schools have a lot of things that they can include as content that you may not think is quote-unquote content. So it's a good idea to catalog what you do have, things that are coming out of the classroom, things that the teachers are working on, what some of the core things that are happening at your school. Those are all content, and sometimes you don't even need to quote-unquote write. It's something you can just pull from what you already have that's existing. So I want people to know that they shouldn't fear the fact that they need original content.
Yeah, and one good strategy, or one good tactic, if you will, that we've seen schools utilize is the content that you're sharing on social, whether that be images or videos of the school. Those are things that you can include on a blog post, right? So think about ways that you can repurpose stuff that you're already doing that's easy to at least bring some fresh new content to the website. It doesn't necessarily need to be a 250 to 500 word blog post, right? It could be a series of images and telling what, a day in the life of, a specific teacher or a specific student. We've seen a variety of different schools do those types of tactics where they bring to life sort of the day in the life of admin, student, teacher, to bring some of that fresh, relevant content to the fold, so it makes it easier for them to do it. That being said, you just want to make sure for those sort of core pages on your website, about us, contact us, what makes us different, those sorts of pages that you see on almost every single school site, that you're adjusting them at least on a biannual basis, whether it's changing a sentence, adding to, just so Google feels like those pages are being updated on a regular basis. So the next tactic that we're going to just spend a few moments on is social media. Increasingly these days, social media is very much best for interacting with your community, whether that is students, parents, teachers, the greater community that's around your school, and advocates, whether that's your board, whether that is charter or school choice advocates, or whether that is also government officials, whether those are local, city, or state or federal officials that you may have relationships with. It's obviously a great way to connect with your audience. Usually it's an audience that knows you well. We are seeing more and more brands spend time building their communities from a social perspective rather than trying to generate new students or generate new interest around their schools. And that's largely because more than ever, all of these social media networks are a pay-to-play structure. Over the past several years, all of them have gone public and they have to make money. And so what you see is increasingly social is about supporting the community that already knows you rather than trying to generate new interest around your school or network of schools. As I mentioned before, advertising is available on all of these platforms, and it's also a really great way to drive, to support your goals, whether those be student enrollment, community advocates, maybe it's building goodwill within the community. Increasingly, you're seeing a ton of ad dollars shift away from some of the older digital advertising opportunities and into things like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter ads. And that's largely because most of these social media networks know a lot more about us as human beings, where we live, where we go, where we eat, what we like, than some of the other platforms that we've been spending dollars on before. So you've seen a huge shift to utilizing these platforms from an advertising perspective as well. We would encourage you to go check out these advertising opportunities because the targeting on them can be super niche. You can go after parents that are a certain age or people of a certain age in a specific zip code that are looking for or searching for educational opportunities, or maybe in a specific buying mode. Again, you can set budgets for these, from the low end all the way through the high end and control them very efficiently. You can customize these ads from a visual perspective. What's the copy? What's the content? You can target these ads to the hilt. So it allows for a really, really targeted opportunity for schools, whether they're trying to drive awareness of themselves, whether they're trying to drive enrollment, retention. If you know all of your parents' email addresses, you can target users from an email address. So there's a ton of opportunities there. Just to give you some idea of the numbers here across the biggies, we'll start with, of course, Facebook. And when we talk about Facebook, it's not just Facebook itself, it's also Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger, which are all amongst the Facebook ecosystem. Why focus on Facebook? Because it continues to be the place, although we are seeing sort of the younger demographics shift away from Facebook increasingly. It is the place to connect with essentially anyone over the age of 18 these days, and across a variety of their places, whether it be Facebook itself, Instagram, WhatsApp, or Messenger. All of these places allow opportunities for you to connect with your audience. You also have other platforms that are out there, like LinkedIn, which is a great place where you can build relationships with potential board members, with politicians, with advocates of the movement. Twitter, another interesting place to connect with the audience, although we're seeing less and less usage and engagement from connecting with your parents or students, but certainly with the movement, with teachers, and with advocates and or a lot of the alliances leverage Twitter. And then think about older platforms, think about different platforms as well that may be out there that you might not be considering as social networks, such as things like Great Schools, which is essentially kind of the Yelp of the educational marketplace. If you're not familiar, Great Schools is a place where parents and or students can go, look up your school, and there are ratings and reviews of your schools that are there. All of these places, regardless if you have a presence, you're going to want to at least have your brand names. So even if you're not creating content and you're not there, take a second to at least grab your brand name so that somebody else doesn't do that. And also take a second or put someone in charge of monitoring these places just to see if there are conversations that are happening across them to ensure that you are either seeing positive, neutral, or negative commentary around your school so you can be aware of what's being said. Do you have anything to add there, Kim?
Yeah, I would add that social media is one of those areas that we've seen schools either really glom onto and use in a very positive way for their schools, You know, even going so far as having students get involved to some respect, not actually owning the social media, but by helping provide content for the social media channels. I also have seen schools shy away from social media, and I would say, you know, really think about how you can communicate with your audiences, whether it be because your objective is student enrollment and retention, or it's thought leadership, or it's just to have awareness of your organization. And, you know, you should start to utilize some of the social media channels. You don't have to be on all channels all the time. You know, have some targets. Look at which social media channel is going to have the most presence for you. And what we've seen from the charter schools that we work with, that Facebook is by far the largest platform where charter schools have a presence. So maybe start there. But definitely, as Michael mentioned, get your name, own your name across all of the channels, but target some specific channels as a start if you don't have a big social media program right now.
Yeah, great ad. The next tactic we're going to talk about is email marketing, one of the old stalwarts that we've had around for many, many years, but increasingly an area where we see schools doing a lot of interesting things, as well as finding a really engaged audience. This is really great for keeping your brand top of mind around different audiences. We are seeing schools do a lot of segmentation so that they have email programs for students, for parents, and messages that go out to advocates, whether those are board members, friends of the school, community members, and government audiences. Email is a super cost-effective opportunity. There are a variety of different platforms out there that will allow schools to have a free platform, if you will, you can take advantage of. And it's very easy for you to utilize, from picking templates and designing things around your brand. It's also really easy for you to track and understand how people are engaging with your email, because you can see things like who opened your email campaigns, who clicked on them, and also get responses to them. It's a really great way and cost-efficient way to keep all of those audiences up to date, what's happening in the school, and also a place, as we've mentioned, where you can repurpose content. So if you're thinking about, okay, I don't know what we're going to write for our email campaign, you know, if you're sharing images and or videos or different pieces of content on social, those are things that you can include on a weekly or monthly newsletter. It's also a great place to provide reminders for parents, whether there are school events, doing things from a pre or post event perspective, and also reminding them about enrollment deadlines and things of that nature, so that they can hit those dates and deadlines, and you don't have to worry about ensuring that maybe phone calls are happening or paperwork's going back and forth. So those are just a couple of different things that you can use from an email perspective. Just a couple of different tips for you. Almost everyone these days, especially from a school context, is reading email, at least the first open, is happening on their phones. So you're going to want to make sure that those layouts are mobile friendly. Almost every single one of the email platforms out there will provide you with mobile friendly layouts. So you don't need to engage a developer if you don't want to get a template made. If you can, let images do the talking. We increasingly are a visual society, and if you can say something with images, then it's a really great way to convey that messaging. Copy and text, a minimum of 15-point font. Why 15? Because that's about the smallest size font that the average human can see by holding their phone at the average arm length. So you're going to want to make sure that those fonts are appropriate. And then, of course, following CAN spam compliance. Here in the US, that's the only spam compliance we have. Just to give you an idea, it does allow you to email anybody one time. So in the US, you can send an email to every single email address, whether those are parents, students, or advocates, or potential students, one time. It is the second time that you need to make sure that you have the opt-in. You also have to make sure that on every email campaign, you have your organization name, address, and phone numbers, and you always have to give all of your subscribers the ability to unsubscribe. As long as you're doing those core things, you are in spam compliance. Some considerations around mobile, because we're largely utilizing things on our phone. Make sure you've got these single or skinny column layouts. Why single or skinny layouts? We all use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are either using one finger or a thumb to get through. We've trained people to have those sorts of interactions on their phones, and that is the way that you can help them get through your emails on a very easy way. These are just a couple examples that we're showing for how you go about having those single column or skinny layouts. So you can show off things in a variety of different ways. You can have a series of images and texts and titles and buttons to allow people to get to the content that you would like them to get to. A couple of different things on those fonts and buttons, a couple different tips. Headlines, minimum of 30 pixels. That how to write great email copy that you see in front of you, that is 30 pixels. Body copy, as we mentioned, I would say a minimum of 16, but at smallest 15. And then just keep in mind that Apple reserves the right to increase any fonts that are above size 13. And most people these days, almost 40% of the market is reading on some sort of Apple-based device. So that's why it's important to understand that anything under size 13 font, Apple can choose to render at a larger font because they know that people can't read that at the average human arm length when they're looking at their phones. Buttons, so your call to actions, should be a minimum of 44 by 44 points. With a little bit of white space, usually 18 to 20 pixels around those buttons. Why? Because that's about the average tappable area of a human thumb or finger. And any of the templates on any of the email service providers will have the appropriately sized buttons for you. We did want to call out that there are a couple of great tools out there that schools can utilize from an email perspective, MailChimp being one of them. The reason why we recommend this, it's very easy to utilize this particular platform. And also, if you have under 5,000 or under subscribers, 5,000 or less would be a better way to say that, subscribers, this platform is free. So you can utilize it and send as much email as you would like to those 5,000 subscribers as many times as you would like. Once you get over the 5,000 subscriber threshold, their plans range from just a couple bucks a month, depending upon what features you want. So it is a fairly minimal investment. Okay, video. Why video? As I mentioned before, 80% of the content that people are going to consume online between now and 2020 is going to be video-based content. So it can really help bring your brand to life by creating just captivating video work, whether it's short or long, that your audience can interact with and like and share and show to family, friends, and people that they live around what is happening inside of your schools. It can really help your school stand out. We've seen a variety of schools leverage short stories and long stories to help them stand out from a visual perspective online. At a minimum, YouTube is going to be the place where you're going to want to play as much as possible when it comes to video. Why? Because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. After Google, where people go to find content and search for things, it is YouTube. So utilize that as a home base, if you will, for your video content. Just like you would go after your domain name, you're going to want to go after a channel that has your name in it. You can share any of those videos that you're sharing on Instagram or the like can be shared and uploaded to YouTube as well. So you can really create a catalog of video content for your school. Keep in mind that increasingly a lot of the searches that are returned from Google are video-based content. So having your content on YouTube means that when someone's searching for your charter school's name, or maybe you've optimized that video with keywords and things like that as you're uploading it, those videos can show up in search results as well, just like your local listing would and just like your website would too. So you've got to be thinking of search as a very holistic thing and how these things can help you in other places too. Now, video doesn't have to be pricey, but it certainly can be. These aren't going to play very well through GoToMeeting, but I've included links in all of them so you can go click on them and take a look. This is an example from Success Academies. If you're not familiar, just a brilliant charter program that's out of the New York area. They do a really good job of bringing the stories of their students and teachers to life online. Again, this is high production value work, not a small investment, but certainly helps them tell their story in a really interesting way. As you can see from this example, it might be playing just a bit for you with no audio, but they're showing off their students and what's happening in their schools and why these students like to come to Success Academies. You can also do animated or sketch things. We've seen a lot of schools leverage sketched opportunities to tell stories about what their students are doing. Again, fairly, depending upon who is your designer and animator, could be a minimal, could be a bit larger investment. But again, you can do these animated or sketch videos as well to tell your point of differentiation. And then, of course, you have short videos that we see on Instagram, 15-second videos, whether we're talking about stories. There's a variety of different ways that you can show off those videos on Instagram or Snapchat or these sort of short video-based platforms, either through actual posts, right, on your Instagram profile, or through your daily stories, which are usually a 24-hour feed of what you've posted. And you can do so many things by bringing in video and layering stickers and writing on them to tell your story. You're just seeing a few examples also from Success Academy about what's happening within their schools. So that sort of concludes all the tactics we're going to go through. We've also bookended in an appendix a variety of other tactics that you can look into. And if you have questions on those, as Kim's mentioned, our contact information is in here so you can go through those. We also wanted to give you a list of resources. For any one of the things that we've touched on, you will find 3 to 8 different places where you can go to learn. Maybe you have someone in your organization that's taking on the communications role for the school. These are all places where they can get hands-on experience. Some of these places are places where they can get certifications for these platforms that we've talked about today. We've included links to all of these places and any resource that we've mentioned today during this conversation. But again, if you've got questions, we are more than willing to answer them. We wanted to wrap up with some final thoughts around where to start this process and also some budget to consider. So first, where to start is really take a look at your current marketing plan. Whatever your overall business or marketing objectives are, all of the digital things that we've talked about today, those should really be supporting, those should absolutely be supporting those objectives. So if you're trying to drive enrollment, then the tactics and the digital channels that you play in should help you drive enrollment. If you're trying to drive awareness and goodwill, then the tactics that you can utilize for those should help drive those objectives. Execution can be internal or external, depending upon maybe you've got a board member, maybe you've got a teacher who has some marketing knowledge, maybe as you grow you've got a communications team in place. So this can be done internally and externally, but keep in mind it's a resources play, right? So you've got to carve out the time and or budget to be able to play in any one of these tactics. And those should be a part of your budgeting period, and understanding the impact of having an internal or external communications help is vitally important as you're going through this. Look for social advocates in your community and or parent groups. One of the things we would suggest to schools is as you're building your social profiles, make sure your parents are engaged on those social profiles so they can reshare your content, they can like it, they can comment on it. All of those things will help lift that content to be seen in front of different audiences. And don't reinvent the wheel. For schools, this isn't a time to get fancy. Leverage the platforms, tell your stories, do the things that the platforms do well, right? On Instagram, we're looking for visual content. Make sure that you're bringing that visual content to life in the appropriate places, whereas text content would be better on your blog post or something along those lines. Anything to add there, Kim?
I think that don't be afraid to actually, incorporate some of these tactics on a trial basis as well, right? If you're not on Facebook, if your school's not on Facebook, look at a short-term plan to see how you can actually start incorporating Facebook. If you need to be focused on your website, look at 1 or 2 key things that you can be doing on your website. I think a lot of times what we find is that school leaders take a look at what they could do with digital marketing, and then they say there's so much, we can't do that. And rather than looking at it in aggregate, just peel off 1 or 2 things that help meet your objectives and do those 2 things really well.
That's such a good point. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Keep in mind that different tactics require different budgets. For any of these tactics, this is a time plus money equals total investment. Some of these tactics are going to require initial and ongoing budgets, while others will just have initial investments. So your website may be an annual investment or an initial investment, and then you're going to shelve it for 1 or 2 years until you consider redesigning it. But doing Google paid ads or Facebook ads is something you're going to have to pay for on an ongoing basis. Add to or leverage your current marketing budget. We typically see schools, if I could pronounce that correctly, we typically see schools earmarking usually 5 to 12% of their total budget towards enrollment or awareness for some of these tactics. That doesn't mean that that's the percentage that you're going to utilize. It just depends on what your goals are. If you have aggressive enrollment needs, then you're going to be having to spend more budget to try and drive net new enrollment. But think about which tactics can help drive not only net new enrollment, but also retention, so you're not spending dollars on always trying to drive net new students to your school. And that is it. As Kim mentioned, our contact information is right there. Those are our direct lines, as well as our email addresses. We would be more than happy to take a few questions. We've got about, 4 or 5 minutes left. So we'll take as many of those questions as possible, but if you don't want to ask one here or we don't get to it, we will follow up. And again, if you've got one that you don't want to ask here, please feel free to reach out to us. And as I mentioned before, there are a few slides after here for some of the tactics we didn't touch on that you're more than welcome to take a look at when those slides and this recording come your way in just a few hours.
So one question that we have here, Michael, is interesting. It's a school that has a parent volunteer who is managing the school's Facebook page, and you know, talking about how do you manage the social page through a parent, and when it looks like the parent is focused on some very specific things. And so I find this interesting because we have had these conversations with several charter schools that we work with. And while, you know, working with parents and parent-teacher groups is great, they can be really supportive, I think the key thing here is that the school really needs to retain ownership of the social channels. And so there needs to be guidelines that you set up, the school sets up, in terms of what you are asking a parent to do, or any, you know, partner that isn't within the school, so that there's clear roles and responsibilities. It sounds like in this particular instance that the parent is the only one who's allowed to work on the Facebook page, and no one else can touch it. And I think that's what we've seen in certain instances can be an issue, because the school then basically their social page has been hijacked, so to speak. Michael, have you seen anything like that? Can offer some best practices on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in working with a couple schools locally, if we have a parent that gets involved, there are a couple step process that we like to go through. The first is to understand, again, what are our goals and objectives on social, and we get aligned together on those, right? Because parents can have very different goals and objectives rather than what a school is looking for. So sitting down and saying, okay, here's what we're trying to do on social. We're trying to tell our story. We're trying to advocate on the school, advocate for the school in the local community. Then you want to delineate roles and responsibilities. So what is the school going to be in charge of? What is the parent going to be in charge of? And is there an approval process that's going to be put in place? And that could be a very simple approval process that it just goes to one person. It could be a multi-level approval process, depending upon how much control that those administrators want. Then we always have to structure essentially what are the roles within Facebook. And Facebook does a really good job these days. They give you 5 different roles for anybody that is allowed to post on the page. The top being the admin level that allows you to do everything. Then they have editor levels that allows you to just edit the content. They have content levels that allows you to add posts or images or videos. They have a moderator level, which just allows you to respond to comments. So you can create different people that are responsible for different things on the Facebook page. I would be very hesitant as an advisor to schools or a member of a board or an admin of a school of giving a parent full ownership of a Facebook page, because you never know what's going to happen with that relationship, one, and you want to be able to retain that control, or at least cut off that control should something come up. So if you're on your Facebook page, you just go to settings, page roles, and then you can see and determine which particular roles you're going to give people. But I would always encourage schools to maintain their admin level. And unless they have a parent that they have 100% trust in, I would encourage you, whoever's managing it, whether it's internal, external resources, that they do not have that admin level. Yep. They've got the appropriate level for what they're doing.
Yep.
That being said, I think it's a great tactic, right? I think it's a great way to manage a Facebook page, because, you know, parents can be, you know, they've got if they're a stay-at-home parent, or if they're sort of a 9 to 3 when they're and just dealing with their kids when they're at home, they can be really great resources to moderate your page, to help extend your page, and make sure they're commenting and liking people's comments. So if you've got someone on your board or a parent that's pretty digitally savvy, leverage them, because they will help expose you to other audiences, and they'll help you keep on top of the latest and greatest more than you. Like as an admin or a teacher, your job is to educate students. That's what your #1 priority is. So if you've got someone on your team that takes on those comm roles, or if you don't because of budget and you've got parents and or an advocate that can help you, leverage them, but make sure you retain that control.
Yeah. So I'm noticing that we are at the top of the hour. We're going to go through a couple more questions. So just so folks know, we recognize that it is 10 o'clock. So the next question here is related to reviews. So a school is dealing with some negative Facebook page reviews, and apparently there's been some that the school has deemed unfair, and so the school has shut down all reviews. So they're looking for some suggestions on how to approach negative reviews. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, Kim and I will always suggest, there's a great book out there called Hug Your Haters. It's by one of our good friends. His name is Jay Baer. What Jay suggests is this: it's a 3 and out philosophy. You should always engage with negative reviews, because when someone sees you and the research suggests, this is fully data-driven. This is not us telling you an opinion. This is what we hear from consumers that on numerous different surveys, is that by not engaging in reviews or not having reviews is viewed more negatively, substantially more negatively, than at least not engaging with those negative views and trying to work with that individual. So Jay's suggestion based on the research is a 3 and out rule. You engage 3 times with a negative reviewer, and then you either take the conversation online or you stop responding. People look at those responses more positively when you have engaged with a negative review than they do with you not having reviews or simply ignoring them. So it's a 3 and out rule that would be the suggestion. Let the reviews come in, respond appropriately, respond in a calm way, respond in a facts-driven manner, and then step out of the conversation. You will find that you will get more advocates that will come help you have those conversations when you actually engage with them than you do when you don't. But by ignoring them and not allowing people to have reviews, they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to go to places like Great Schools, which you cannot moderate. They're going to go to places like Yelp. They're going to go to places like Google Places and the local listings, and they're going to put reviews everywhere. That's just the nature of the beast. This is like if you dined and had a bad experience at a restaurant, more people are going to say negative things than positive. But here's the deal. If you build up goodwill amongst the people that do believe in your school, you will find that those advocates will come to your defense more often when you actually take the time to deal with those negative reviews versus not. So, turn off negative reviews at your peril. They're going to do it somewhere else, rather than do it on Facebook. I get it. You have only got so much time in your day to deal with these things, but they're going to post somewhere. They're going to find an outlet. That's just what people do. But by ignoring them, you're usually doing more damage to your brand than by not at least addressing the situation. Yeah, and on that same token, sorry, always make sure, my last and final thought, always make sure.
Looks like we may have lost Michael. I will just add to what Michael was saying is that, when you do have a negative review on your page, for this instance is Facebook, you have a community that's there, and what I've seen with several schools, if a negative review goes up, there is usually a group of parents that then come back and support the school and actually negate or communicate directly with the person that has put the negative review up. So having that goodwill is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. One last question we'll take, and then we'll wind up here. So someone has asked about the Snapchat channel and whether or not, what our thoughts are around having Snapchat to reach a younger, more modern audience. I know that we probably have similar thoughts on this, Michael. I'll let you answer fully, but I think Snapchat is interesting, but may not necessarily trump a Facebook or other social channels that may have better results for a school?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts there. Number one, Snapchat is not growing as fast as it was doing. It's at a bit of a peak. My gut feeling is it's not going to get much larger. It is very much a 25 and under social network. So their core audience is anybody under the age of 25. I will tell you that based on just purely asking this question of the kids of our society, I hate saying it makes me feel old because I was that age just a few years ago, but asking young people that are in my life, what are you doing on Snapchat? Most of them are just using it as a one-to-one or one-to-group platform. They're not looking at the media content there. They're not looking at brand stories. They're looking just at their friends, and they're using it as a peer-to-peer communication platform. That being said, again, as we've mentioned before, you should at least have your name, your school name, just so that you've got it controlled. It would be terrible for a student or a parent that doesn't like your school to take over that name. I don't think it's a great student engagement platform just because, as I mentioned before, I don't think a lot of students are utilizing it to look at brand content or look at school content. I think they're looking at it just to have a conversation that disappears with their friends based on just conversations that I've had with kids that are that age. So I don't find it as a play that will support an objective for a school. That being said, if you've got all these other networks covered and it's an opportunity to spread your message in another place, sure, utilize it to experiment, see how much reach you get. It may be a place that you might have some engagement. It's somewhere to test, but I don't think it's a place that you go to right away. It's a place to get your name and watch and see if it grows, because my guess is that we're not going to see a ton of user growth, and you're not going to see growth in places beyond just that student demo or that student age group.
Great. So we have a bunch of other questions, but I think we will reach out to folks, or please feel free to contact us with the email and phone numbers that are listed here on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and thank you, Michael, for joining us as well.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.